I want to just continue a bit on the last point that Tony made, and that is what is taking place in Canada as this agenda of annexation and war and criminalization of dissent escalates and develops more and more. So a lot of important events have taken place since we last marched to demand an end to occupations, to say bring the troops home now, and to denounce the Israeli attacks on the Freedom Flotilla and show our support for the Palestinian people. And the world has not become a more peaceful place. And in Canada, the criminalization of dissent is reaching a level which I would suggest has not been seen since the McCarthy era. So it's a real wake-up call for us, and something that we need to discuss amongst ourselves as to what is the significance of what is going on. Now in Toronto, in June, at least 40,000 people took to the streets of Toronto over the course of the week, maybe more, leading up to and during the G8 summit. They were there to oppose the undemocratic nature of the G8, G20, which imposes its economic and political agenda on the whole world. People said, they are few, we are many. They said, this is what democracy looks like. This is what a police state looks like, they cried. They spoke to the sense of people across the country that Canadians are marginalized while the government pursues an agenda of annexation, of war, of criminalization of dissent, all on the basis that everything must be subordinated to the aims of the biggest monopolies. And everything must be subordinated to the aim of the US to have Canada as its reserve, to have Canada as the source of secure oil for war, to have Canada as part of that fortress from which you seek hegemony and dictate over the whole world. Now, at the present time, Harper is working hard to get a seat for Canada on the Security Council, a seat which Canada does not deserve. What accomplishments does he cite? The participation of Canada in a predatory war against the people of Afghanistan, military intervention in Haiti, which showed, according to Harper, that Canada is a power. Totally different than the reasons that Canadians gave material aid and went to Haiti and did all these things. Totally different. Harper said he was there to show that Canada is a power. Suppression of the people at the G8, G20. A majority of Canadians feel that Canada should not have a seat on the Security Council, and that says a lot about how uneasy Canadians are about the Harper agenda. When Parliament was opened last March, with full 19th century colonial arrogance, the throne speech stated, "Canada will show the world that people can live in harmony." Harper wants Canadians to connect such statements with a vision of Canada as a peacekeeper or a peacemaker. Now, I want to make the point that I don't think such statements are meaningless, just empty rhetoric, that we can lightly dismiss them. We have to say, what is he getting at here? What is he doing? We saw at the G8, G20, of course, what the Harper government intends for people who oppose this vision of harmony and the agenda which the imperialist countries are imposing on the world. Are the government and state's political police in harmony with Canada's Muslim community? Do they not threaten everyone who stands with the Palestinian people, accuse us of hate crimes, and turning truth on its head? That those who resist occupation and aggression are themselves the ones who are guilty of hate crimes? So the speech from the throne went on to say, in words reminiscent of Teddy Roosevelt, for those of you who study these things, speak softly but carry a big stick, if you'll remember, he said. The throne speech went on to say, to seek peace but stand on guard for rights, democracy, and the rule of law. To be resolute in confronting a global crisis and ambitious in planning for a more prosperous future. Now, couched in this language is a neoliberal conception of no rights, only privileges that can be taken away under exceptional circumstances, such as the exceptional circumstances we are supposedly facing now. In practice, this means getting behind the warmongering imperialist agenda to continue to serve the interests of the monopolies. So the point that I think that's important here is that what is being said is that those who do not share Harper's values or his vision of harmony, those who don't want to be part of his harmony, don't deserve rights. And that's what real life is revealing, and that's what happened at the G8, G20 is revealing. Harper speaks of the rule of law. Rule of law in words, attacks on the people in deeds. The issue of police repression in Toronto was not that of excessive or disproportionate violence by the police forces during this event. This was an unprecedented command structure of the military and all the police forces, RCMP, OPP, and so on. It was very premeditated and deliberate. So we have witnessed not excessive or disproportionate violence, but open criminality by the police in a deliberate, premeditated action to suppress the political opposition to the G8, G20. Police attacks on the demonstrators and more than 1,105 arrests indicate the degree to which dissent is being criminalized in Canada. In the face of growing opposition by Canadians to Canada's participation in predatory war against the Afghan people, and the entire anti-social offensive we face, the attacks on healthcare, the attacks on education, on pensions, the attacks on people's right to be, on their right to conscience, we need to discuss what measures the government is taking to prepare to further deprive people of their rights. So let's think about what happened just in the last couple of weeks. Remember, for weeks, the media have fomented hysteria about a Muslim community center to be built near Ground Zero in New York City. Like every night, day after day after day, you saw a few hundred demonstrators. Like, we know that in the United States, like 100,000 people can demonstrate against the war. You will never hear about it. So these are very organized, conscious actions. So this hysteria is fomented for weeks. Then comes the threat to burn 200 Korans on the 9th anniversary of 9/11 by a pastor in Gainesville, Florida, who happens to have a church with 30 followers. So now this becomes national news for weeks and weeks. So first we had the police violence against the G8. Then we had, and that includes that many of the young people are being accused of conspiracy. If you're an organizer of the demonstration, that's conspiracy. Then this is followed by the arrest of Muslims under the guise that they're terrorists. And we know nothing really about that because everything is kept under wraps. But you're just, hysteria is developed again. Then soon after that, you have the arrest of the Tamil asylum seekers. And a whole hysteria is developed all over again. And this whole campaign, all queue jumpers and all this. As though there wasn't a refugee law in Canada. And so then the whole thing is now this hysteria, all these Tamils are really terrorists. So the whole thing is being prepared that these are exceptional circumstances. We face all these threats of terrorism. Then, all of a sudden, we have everyone from Harper to Obama to everyone all over the world coming forward and saying, oh, what's happening to this Gainesville pastor, that's terrible. But we stand for democracy, we stand for peace, we stand for human rights, we're against the burning of the Quran, and we stand for Muslims having rights. Now this is then used as an occasion, as an opportunity, for that the Muslims are now all supposed to declare that they're patriotic. They're all supposed to, it just reminds you of the bloody McCarthy loyalty oath all over again, that now you're supposed to stand up and say, oh, I'm patriotic. Oh, I'm all for the war in Afghanistan. Oh, I'm totally for this agenda of war and fascism, whatever. So this is the attack on the Muslims, and then you have those people who are in the pay of the government and so on, who call themselves Muslim organizations. They get up and accuse everyone else. So now you have this attack on people. So then, in the midst of all this, that there are these dangerous extremists, okay? Now, we've heard all this before. Extremists on the right, extremists on the left. And who now is going to be the center? Who's going to be the moderates? Who's going to be the voice of moderation, of reason? Oh, it's Stephen Harper. Those who champion aggressive war, who demand that the whole world submit to the agenda of the biggest monopolies, who are the biggest backers of the Zionist agenda, the opponents of the rights of the Palestinian people, who threaten Pakistan, Iran, Lebanon, North Korea, Cuba. These, we are told, are the voices of reason and the defenders of rights, democracy, and freedom. So the whole staged melodrama is an occasion to push this theme that there are those people who are lawful and legitimate protesters, lawful and legitimate Muslims, unlawful and illegitimate protesters, unlawful and illegitimate political dissent, unlawful and illegitimate Muslims, whatever, okay? And that everyone now has to line up, you know, put their hand up, swear their loyalty oath to Harper's values, and that's supposed to be the values of Canadians. So these dangerous developments must not be permitted to pass. And in closing, I just want to point out some things. The U.S. has some 11,600 private contractors and 50,000 troops remaining in Iraq after its alleged disengagement. It commands 150,000 U.S. and other NATO forces in Afghanistan. It's routinely bombing Pakistan and threatening Iran and the DPRK. Outside the U.S., it has almost 1,000 military bases in 65 countries in the world. It continues to practice torture and renditions to torture and flouts civil rights in the name of national security. And Canada is following suit. The massive disinformation campaign over extremism, so-called extremism, underlies the fact that in the face of this deep all-round crisis, which includes the profound military and economic crisis in which the U.S. system is mired and the Canadian system mired with it, the U.S. has unleashed the greatest assault since the McCarthy era on the conscience of its own people and that of the peoples of the world. Canadians have never accepted a definition of themselves as warmongers and historically have taken pride in the concept that Canada can be a factor for peace and social justice. Canadians have seen themselves as a country where people of all nationalities can together find a path to progress if we're not blocked by the narrow interests of the rich and the monopolies. Canadians need an anti-war government that represents the new, not a government that fancies itself a stern patriarch, threatening everyone in the name of Canadian values and high ideals while engaging in war preparations, denial of rights, and brutal suppression of its own people through police acting with impunity. Thank you very much.